Chairwoman, thank you. A couple of questions for our SEC nominees, and thank you all for your willingness to serve. And I look forward to developing a solid working relationship with each of you. For Mr. Lizarraga and Mr. Uyeda, this I hope is a yes or no answer, so I can get to other questions as well. Mr. Lizarraga, do you agree that any change to the disclosure rules, which would more than double the current cost of disclosures with an outsized impact on smaller companies, should be subjected to robust public debate, including in front of this committee, before those rules are finalized?
Yes.
Mr. Uyeda?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Lizarraga, do you support competition among asset managers and believe that investment firms should compete to manage investors' money?
Senator, I believe in competition in all segments of our markets.
I'll ask both of you, but let me add a little to that question. It is related to the following. Do you believe that smaller firms, such as those with less than $500 billion in assets, which seems less than small to me, but should have the same opportunities as the multi-trillion-dollar firms to list exchange-traded products in order to compete and serve investors?
I'm not sure I understood the last part of your question, sir.
Do you believe that smaller firms should have the same opportunities as multi-trillion-dollar firms to list exchange-traded products in order to compete and serve investors?
Thank you, sir. I believe small firms, small issuers should be treated fairly, just like all market participants should be. So, yes, I agree that they should be equitably treated.
This isn't a trick question. There's not anything I'm trying to capture here other than to make certain that what I have seen where small firms have been excluded from the ability to compete with larger firms due to decisions made by regulators, I want to make certain that you have an appreciation, that both of you have an appreciation for those smaller firms and will not do anything to disadvantage them and their capability of attracting and managing funds for clients as compared to those large multi-trillion-dollar firms.
Yes, sir. I agree with that principle generally, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Uyeda?
Yes. And in fact, I would point out that consideration of competition is statutorily mandated by Congress that the SEC consider. So efficiency, competition, capital formation are three factors that, by law, the SEC must consider in any rulemaking. In addition, the SEC has a mandate under the Regulatory Flexibility Act to look at the impact on small entities, and a number of those definitions, particularly in the asset management space, I think are potentially outdated, need to look at. The current small entity definition is just $25 million of assets under management or less, which, as you noted, 500 billion these days seems like quite a small amount. So that would be something to think about, updating those limits.
Thank you both for your answers. It's the follow-up to that, which I think, I'll ask you if you'll commit to working with this committee to ensure that smaller firms have the opportunities and necessary infrastructure to compete with the largest management firms by allowing them to offer exchange-listed products.
Yes, sir. I commit to working with this committee on all issues before us today.
It's a good answer.
Yes, I also commit to working with this committee on consideration of those issues.
Mr. Barr, in June of 2020, you stated that the continued reluctance of the Fed to force banks to preserve capital in the face of global pandemic and economic collapse. You talked about that circumstance. It seems that throughout the pandemic and now, capital liquidity levels in the banking sector have been a key strength for our economy. And my question is, does that fact, if you agree with that, does that fact lend credence to the banking sector being adequately prepared for the next recession?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. The statement I made was in the context of the global pandemic having just hit the United States. And before Congress and the Federal Reserve took the really extraordinary actions they took to protect our economy, I was concerned that the paying out of dividends and permitting the cash repurchase of shares was dissipating capital when it needed to be preserved. But I agree with you that capital and liquidity today is quite strong.
Thank you. And I'm out of time. Thank you.